Senate confirmation hearing, which explains why I have not been nominated for anything, but I'm still holding out hope. Right now, we welcome Congressman Blaine Luektemeyer from the 3rd Congressional District. Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Mark. Sound like you've got an interesting show going.
We're monitoring these hearings that are going on live right now with Senator Sessions. He's been raked over the coals today by the Democrats so far.
You know, if that's the only question they can ask about him, or what's your definition of extreme, I think he's in pretty good shape.
Well, I hope so. Unfortunately, they've gone a lot further than that. So we'll see how that goes. I read with interest that you had been assigned a subcommittee on financial services. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was the chair of the Housing and Insurance Committee, and now I've been moved over to financial institutions. And the financial institutions basically oversees all the banks and credit unions, mortgage bankers, credit collectors, payday lenders, anything in the mortgage lending, banking space, including the regulators. So we're over the FDIC and CFPB and all those folks as well.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk of trying to maybe roll back Dodd-Frank.
Yeah, that's probably going to happen. We're looking at probably February or March to have the bill on the floor. We put a bill together called the Choice Act last fall and passed it out of our committee. Probably going to take that same bill and make some tweaks to it and changes to it as per the requests and considerations of the new administration.
Yeah,
and then run that and probably get it out of the House first part of mid-February, and then out of the committee. And then probably out of the House sometime first part of March.
So tell my listeners what the impact of that is, whether Dodd-Frank gets eliminated or rolled back. Why is that good for consumers?
Well, it was supposed to be a response to the debacle of 2008 and some of the banking and financial world missteps and some of the nonsense that went on. Of course, when you put Congress in charge of solutions, you usually wind up with a mess, and that's what we wound up with here. Because they really didn't understand what caused this and what actually they needed to do to fix the problem. So instead of fixing the problem, they've exacerbated the problem. What they want to do, instead of making the big banks responsible and be able to break them up, they've actually made them bigger and weaker. The second thing that happened, they're trying to improve access to credit and to protect the consumers. And what you've actually done is gone the other direction. And and statistically, I can point to studies that show this, where this actually made it more difficult for consumers to have access to credit. For instance, one of the things that's increased costs is before Dodd-Frank, 75% of the individuals had free checking. Now it's down to 37% of individuals have free checking. So all of these things compounded hurt the ability of consumers to be able to have access to credit, driving up the cost of the credit they do get. And it's stymieing new services from the banking side, from the financial services world, to be able to address some of the concerns and some of the needs of the consumers as well as small business folks.
Yeah, I know it's also had a big impact on the mortgage lending business as well.
Oh, absolutely. Devastating.
I came from a couple years in the financial services industry back to this job in the media, and I know that these new DOL standards that were put in place, and I don't know if your committee is going to deal specifically with that if you're on the banking side, but I know in talking to Ann Wagner, there was some discussion and still trying to fight those new regulations, and there was even an effort to try to impose those on the brokerage side of the business, which would mean non-retirement accounts. And it's a fiduciary rule effectively, but in my opinion, it's not in the consumer's best interest because I think it's going to end up costing them a whole lot more than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, and it really restricts the ability of them to get financial advice. I mean, a lot of these folks, when you're talking about this, basically it deals with IRAs, although there's other investment instruments that it deals with, but primarily IRAs. And primarily IRAs are the tool that a lot of middle and low income folks utilize. And so if they don't have access to the best advice on how to utilize those accounts, they're not experts. They can't hire financial experts, and yet when they go to somebody who is to give them advice, they're restricted in what they can tell them. And it also affects. Sometimes people don't realize also affects small businesses. A lot of small businesses are the managers of these 401ks for their employees, and it also affects their ability to be the managers of these 401ks. Because I've talked to some small business folks who said, "Hey, we've thrown our hands up. We're going to turn the IRAs back to the individuals because we can't put up with the nonsense and the rules and regulations. We're going to be responsible. We're going to have fiduciary responsibility. So we're going to get rid of it altogether. And so, again, the individual is going to have to be responsible for this, and they're going to throw their hands up and say, what do I do now? So it's really, while it's a well-intentioned rule, it's truly a solution in search of a problem. I have personally talked to the lady in charge of this and trying to get this rule through, and I've asked her multiple times over the last several years, name me one instance, just one, where there's been an abuse of this situation that your solution solves that problem. And to this day, she cannot point to one single situation where there's been abuse of some individual, and this solution would have solved that problem. This is truly a solution in search of a problem that has nothing to do with protecting consumers. It's about taking control by the administration over this investment area of our economy.
Just quickly, with the turnover in the White House, can something be done to stop this, or do you think it's already in place now?
No, I think there's a possibility that this one could be overturned by Trump himself.
Okay.
Because at this point, it hasn't been litigated, and since there's no once it's litigated and there's a court ruling, which says it is a law, then we have to go back and legislatively fix it. At this point, that hasn't been done. Although there's some litigation out there, if we stop the litigation and have Trump just rescind this, there is a possibility that could happen. So they're looking into it right now. I can tell you that whenever the President-elect Trump becomes President Trump next Friday, he is going to spend a couple hours that afternoon going down into his new office, and start signing rescissions of executive orders and of rules that the bureaucracy has put together and done over the last several months and years that would be in his purview. So this could be one of those.
Yeah. Congressman Luektemeyer, what do you see as one of the first few things we're going to see roll out of this new Congress? And is it going to happen before Donald Trump gets sworn in on the 20th?
Well, we passed last week the REINS Act, which is our bill to try and rein in the bureaucracy, which has been making law through rule. It's got to go through the Senate, of course, but I think there's a good opportunity to get something like that done.
Good.
The administration themselves, their priorities are tax reform, immigration reform, and getting rid of Obamacare. And so we are working on that as we speak as well. I know that our leadership team is meeting with Trump's transition team right now this week to discuss tax reform and where we are at with that. I know that in talking with Chairman Hensling of our Financial Services Committee, there's a lot of other things going on with our Dodd-Frank bill. But the leadership is talking with the Trump team on Obamacare and all the other stuff as well. So all those discussions are taking place right now. We're working with them, and as soon as the Trump administration is in place, then I think you'll be able to see very quickly, within a week or two, a lot of things start to happen and take place. Right now, we're just sort of passing bills and positioning ourselves to be able to do those things once the administration's in place.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful that Obamacare revision starts, and maybe we see some block grants of maybe Medicare money or Medicaid money back to the states, so we can decrease the size of this behemoth a little bit.
That's the direction we want to go.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit because we got to pass the bill through the Senate, you got to pass the bill through the House, and then if you pass the replacement bill, it's got to go through 2 or 3 committees. So it's going to take a little bit to do this, and then we don't want to just flip a switch and cause people to be no longer to be able to have insurance. We want a transition period here. So it looks like the transition period may be as long as 2 years, but we don't want people to go without coverage. We want the private sector to be able to develop policies and controls, and the medical profession to be able to adjust to this new regime that we want to put in place so that they can give the care that we want, which puts the doctor and patient in charge of the care instead of the government insurance companies. And it takes a little time to transition to that, but we want to make sure we do it right. And so there's going to be some discussion here for the first couple of months to try and make sure we do get this right. And you'll see a lot of, again, discussion on it, but we're headed in that direction.
That's good.
And the administration is going to give us some direction on how they would like to have things done. So we're kind of waiting on them to get in place to be able to finalize the direction we want to go on it.
Congressman Blaine Luektemeyer, third